Criticism. And of course, the organization is always open for criticism. We'd like to hear criticism. It helps us to grow. Have you heard that phrase? What did you experience now? And of course, I hope that many of you watch this and say, oh, I actually told them my criticism and they reacted accordingly and they changed things. And that's the great side of it. However, I had a quite significant amount of emails where people told me, look, I actually said my criticism. And after that, I was sidelined. After that, I was criticized for criticizing, or after that, I faced negative consequences for actually giving them criticism for which they asked. And that is now exactly the point. We have to talk about one important issue, and that is called the so-called pseudo criticism issue. Of course, organizations should be open for criticism. The question is, how do you deal with it? And we have to get straight into the point here. First, of course, the idea of telling people to criticize you and giving you not only feedback, but also straightforward criticism first, it's great. Why is it great? You have people who have a different point of view than you. I give you an example. When you are the sales leader, you're not in the field, so they can probably tell you what are client developments, what do client want, what do we do right, what do we do wrong. Or when you produce a certain product, people who work in a production plant facility, and the facilities there in the factory can tell you, oh, maybe we should have a different process, or our supply chain isn't too great, or purchasing is always a bit too early or a bit too late, just not on point. Or maybe the sales team has to onboard our clients differently or check for other aspects. Asking the community is always a great thing because the community is closest to the aspect with which they work. No CEO, CMO, COO, CFO, CIO, CTO, call it as you like. No senior executive can be as close to the subject matter as the people working with exactly that subject matter every single day. The main question now is, as soon as they face a criticism, how do they react? And when they react, quite often people say, well, it didn't go too well. I told them something and they said, how dare I? I don't have the view. I don't have the overview. I don't see the big picture. Sometimes they even say things like, I don't have the qualification. How dare I bring this forward? How can I say this in public? And that exactly is the problem. Some people want criticism, but what they actually want is criticism of others. Tell me where in the organization something goes wrong so I can point to others and join the blame game. And that is, of course, not very good leadership. It's actually really bad leadership. So what they do is they go from criticism straight into conflict. And going into the conflict to solve something is a good thing. However, what they do is they go into conflict with you, the person who said something. And then they will tell you why you are wrong. And don't get me wrong, in certain cases, criticism is not justified. We get to that in a minute. However, we unfortunately have a high level of leaders that lack self-reflection. And by the way, when you now say, I am not one of them, I give you a very simple example. I'm self-employed. There's a reason why after every training, I get externally evaluated. After every coaching, I get evaluated. After every interim mandate and during it, I get evaluated. Why is that the case? Your self-reflection can be, due to coaching and qualification, can be very, very well on a very high level. However, it is never 100%. You never see 100%. And of course, very important here, some people have the wrong information and they say, oh, feedback, you have to take it. That's wrong. Feedback, when someone gives you unsolicited feedback, you don't have to take it. And also, with every feedback, of course, you have the right to state when something is wrong. I give you an example. This year, I had one participant in a seminar who said, oh, we had a great time management training, amazing. However, I would have loved if you told me something about Copilot AI and time management. However, first, that was never on the agenda. Second was a public seminar, so it wasn't on the agenda for a reason. And third, it is something that is basically a one-to-one coaching, not a public seminar content. You simply want to save money because when I tell you something about Copilot and time management, which of course could have been possible, others in the room will say, well, we don't have Copilot, we have Claude, we have ChatGPT, we don't use that system. Why does this person now get a virtual private classroom? VPC, it's called, by the way. And then it's perfectly fine to say, look, it wasn't on the agenda, it was never promised. I can understand why you want it, but we can do one-to-one coaching. And by the way, he fully understood that I said that and he accepted that. We both agreed on it. So it's important that criticism, when you get criticism, you have the right to make a statement. You have a right to make yourself heard. The main problem now arises when you have people who do not only lack self-reflection, but they are part of other people who brought their career forward. And they will always stick together under certain circumstances. When people say, look, this person promoted me, so next time I am going to help them with their promotion. And we basically push each other up the corporate or the organizational ladder. That's called insider deal. These insider deals are, of course, not great, not neither for the people and especially not for the organization. And when it gets really bad, you end up with cliques. And a clique means there are a group of people, two, three, four people, and they stick together whatever the cost. If someone does something wrong, they will always blame someone else. If someone does something right, they all expect praise, every single one of them. So, and by the way, the main issue here when people say, but a network is important, yes, a network based on skills and quality is actually helpful. You should have your network. Networking is extremely important. However, insider deals and cliques are not network. Insider deals and cliques are I chose people randomly that helped me, and I will push them forward even if they are not competent for the job. So these kind of cliques are not helpful. They are harmful for the organization. They are harmful for teams, the departments, and by the way, they are finally harmful to you because sooner or later you will up somewhere where you are brutally incompetent and you will fail massively, and then you will not recover from that. That's a very important point here. The question is, what can we do now? Because we are here to talk about how to make things better, not to complain about things. First, of course, when people think they have a great self-reflection and they know it all, you have to bring them to awareness. There's coaching available. You can make leaders aware of that probably, maybe they are not the only source of knowledge, information, or wisdom. Very important with this awareness. By the way, now very important is when you say, well, regarding feedback and criticism, we do this once a year. That's as a first step, that is good. However, let's say a person evaluates you and you evaluate your leader. When you can do that, amazing. Thumbs up, go for it. Some people will now say, look, I'm a factory worker. I'm relying on this job. I'm working in a country where I have no layoff protection. I should criticize my leader, who is a double MBA prestigious university person, and I got into this business by recommendation by a friend. I'm hanging on a thread. And now they expect me to criticize the person that can fire me on the spot. Here's the hint. It's not going to happen. And of course, that is understandable. It's not for everyone. So that's why some people have an anonymous system in place. When feedback becomes very straightforward, anonymous systems win because many people are unable or unwilling or both to criticize their leaders because they fear the negative consequences. So you need to have a process in place, and the process must reflect on absolutely anyone's needs. When you're a small organization, you know each other well, so you all talk together every single day anyway, you probably do already have a process in place, which happens every single day. The larger the organization becomes, the more processes you need in place. Annual appraisal interview is the first starting point, then evaluation of leaders. However, when now a negative evaluation happens, what's the consequence not only for the person working there? When you have a worker that's really bad, doesn't produce great quality, there will be consequences. What happens when you have a leader who's not doing well? Because many people say, as soon as I criticize my leader, they get everything put together in a paper, they get it served via email, then they read it and they delete it. Nothing's happening. So you must have this bonus mailer system, the good and bad system, with consequences, of course, on both sides, not only on the lower end of the hierarchical pyramid. It's very important that this process needs to be in place. The good thing is that as soon as people know there's a process, leadership usually becomes better. I give you a very simple example. When your sales team says we really have bad software, we need a new CRM system, and you say, oh yeah, at the end of the day, we have to make our clients happy. I just take a note, and then you say the magic phrase, I hear you. I don't know why there are still coaches out there who tell you that I hear you is remotely acceptable. I hear you means I hear you and I couldn't care less. When you think that I hear you is a good phrase, or you have trainers or coaches who tell you it is, here are the news. It's not. Because I hear you is one of the most passive aggressive lines we have in the workplace as of yet. So be aware that you get rid of that line, the quicker the better. And when you now have a process in place where people say, look, I actually wanted to say I hear you and then do nothing. However, I know there's a process in place. Next year, they're going to evaluate me. They evaluate me based on what I just said. And they will probably say, he promised something. Niels promised something and he didn't keep the promise. And that's not great, is it? So as soon as people see there's a process in place, the action actually goes forward way quicker. And when you then have the action in place and the reflection goes up, better awareness, excellent process, action being taken, by time, things will become a lot better in your organization. I wish you all the best implementing that in your organization as well. And when you now say, wait, I have a couple of questions about this. This is rather complex, isn't it? Yes, of course. So first, of course, when you now watch me on YouTube, feel free to leave a like there. Subscribe to my channel. Feel free, of course, to leave a comment there. I'm always looking to have discussions with you. When you now listen to me on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can also leave a review there. Thank you very much for 5 stars. We put a lot of effort into this. And we're also very grateful if you recommend this. We, again, by the way, side remark, we went top 100 in India. In India, I'm a non-native speaker and we are now top 100 last week. Top what there are 1.1 billion people living there with an aeon of podcasts out there, and we went top 100. So thank you very much for being so loyal to this podcast. When you recommend this to friends, family, workplace, absolutely anywhere, I'm very grateful for that. I put a lot of effort into this, research and everything. So I'm very happy when you recommend this to anyone who's able to join. Very important also when you want to have leadership tips, we have the so-called YouTube Shorts. Feel free to use them anytime. They are, as the name says, they're only available on YouTube. Feel free to use them. I promised you that this year I'm going to have at least one leadership tip per day. So I promised you 365 leadership tips from me or external experts each day. So an average one per day. We have more than 200 online already this year, and we are only halfway through. So we are way ahead of plan. So feel free to watch the YouTube shorts as well. By the way, it really pays off not only to subscribe to my channel on YouTube, but also put the little bell in there, because when you put the bell in there, then you get a tiny notification on your computer or your smartphone when something new is online, so you're not missing anything. Really useful here. And of course, with a podcast, you can follow me Apple Podcast, Spotify. When you say, hey, we need someone in our organization. We need a trainer, a speaker, a coach, a mentor, a consultant, a project interim manager. Feel free to contact me anytime. And of course, you can go to my website, nb-networks.biz, or you just drop me an email, nb@nb-networks.com. Always happy to hear from you. When you now want to have live sessions, we have live sessions. By the way, we only communicate these via the leadership letter. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com, put your email address in there. As soon as you put it in there, you receive one email. No worries. It's 100% content, ad-free guarantee. Only one email every Wednesday morning. And there you get free access to more than, meanwhile, we have more than 400 episodes, articles online in the English and German language. So there's lots of content out there, all scientifically sound, all well researched, all available for you right here, right now. And it grows every single week. So feel free to join here as well. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. And of course, you can follow me on social media. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me on Instagram. Leave a like on Facebook or subscribe to my channel on YouTube. However, and by the way, if you contact me on any of these platforms or via email, I answer every single message within 24 hours or less. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you there. The most important message, however, is always the last one I give in every single podcast and videocast. Apply, apply, apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive aspects that you obviously want to see in your organization. I wish you all the best doing so. Feel free to contact me anytime. I'm answering every single message within 24 hours or less, so I'm looking forward to hearing from you there. And at the end of this podcast, as well as at the end of this video cast, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.